Ethan Fastbreak. Sullivan stood by the enormous windows of the Galactic Council's observation deck, his gaze lost in the constant stream of alien ships weaving through the vast docking lanes of the massive space station. Despite humanity's full integration into the galactic community over the past 50 years, the sight still stirred a feeling of childlike wonder within him, like he'd sneaked into the universe's most incredible theme park. Of course, he'd never admit that to any of the other species' representatives, especially not to Ambassador Galen. And just as if on cue, the 8-foot-tall, purplish humanoid with retractable bone ridges approached, his distinctive click-clack stride reverberating through the corridor. Fastbreak suppressed an eye roll. It was time for yet another round of, "Let's patronize the humans." "Ah, Ambassador Sullivan," Galen's voice rang out in its signature three-toned cadence, dripping with both condescension and an overly bright cheer. "I trust you're enjoying the view? I imagine it must still seem quite overwhelming for your species." Fastbreak turned and threw on his most polished diplomatic smile. "Ambassador Galen, always a pleasure, but after 50 years of interstellar relations, I'd say humanity is getting pretty comfortable with the whole advanced civilization thing." Galen's bone ridges rippled, the Xanathar equivalent of an irritated snort, the kind Fastbreak had grown used to. Yes, Galen said, his mandibles twitching. "Humanity has certainly made admirable progress for such a young species, but some members of the Council are still concerned about your military readiness." "Military readiness?" Fastbreak's voice was steady, but the twitch of his left eye betrayed his frustration. "We've maintained peaceful relations with every species we've encountered, and even signed those mutual defense treaties you were so eager about last cycle." "Treaties," Galen responded, pacing slowly, each step measured with the kind of precision that was typical for Xanathar, "are only as effective as the forces behind them. And forgive me, Ambassador, but it seems like your species is more focused on sports and entertainment than actual military discipline." Fastbreak bit back a grin, remembering how, if Galen only knew about the time humanity almost sparked an interplanetary conflict over a questionable call in the 0G rugby finals, he'd probably have a meltdown. "Our priorities are in order, Ambassador, I assure you." Galen's secondary eyes narrowed, signaling an impending argument. "Our analysis indicates your species invests more energy in recreational combat simulations than actual military training. It's troubling. How can we trust humans to handle real combat situations when you're so—" He waved a dismissive hand, practically spitting out the word playful, as though it were a curse. The disdain in his tone could sink a battleship. Fastbreak, however, knew that tone well, just before someone seriously misjudged humanity's capabilities. He smiled to himself, thinking of an old Earth saying about being underestimated. "Tell you what, Ambassador," Fastbreak said, turning back to the window. "If you're so concerned about our combat readiness, why don't we arrange a friendly competition? I'll show you how humans perform under pressure." Galen's bone ridges flared in interest. "A combat demonstration? Now that would certainly be enlightening." "Enlightening doesn't even begin to cover it," Fastbreak muttered, already reaching for his communicator. He had a few calls to make, starting with a certain former basketball coach who had been itching to show the galaxy just how tough humans could be. Galen, for all his wisdom, had no idea what he'd just walked into. He was about to learn why every human diplomat had a sports nickname, and why Fastbreak Sullivan hadn't been chosen randomly. 3 days later, Fastbreak found himself before the Galactic Council's Special Committee on Military Affairs, fighting the urge to laugh at the absurdity of the situation. 12 different alien species sat perched in their elevated pods, all looking down at him as though he were about to propose something completely outrageous, which, let's be honest, he absolutely was. Galen stood tall at his own podium, his bone ridges practically humming with smugness. "The Xanathar Empire formally requests a demonstration of Earth's combat capabilities through traditional war games," Galen announced, clearly relishing the moment. "We propose a scenario involving our elite Crimson Guard unit." "Counter-proposal," Fastbreak interjected, his voice smooth, thoroughly enjoying the way Galen's mandibles twitched in annoyance. "We show you one of humanity's most challenging combat simulations, a contest that tests strength, speed, strategy, and teamwork. a competition so intense that it's known to reduce grown adults to tears. The council chamber erupted in a chorus of murmurs, each translation device humming with confusion. The Zaltorii representative, shimmering in crystalline form, leaned forward, his body refracting light like 1,000 prisms. And this simulation is basketball? The universal translators had a field day with that one. Several representatives clutched their devices, clearly questioning their accuracy. Basketball? Galen repeated slowly, as though the word were a venomous snake. Our records indicate this is merely a recreational activity. Oh, that's just what we tell the public, Fastbreak said, winking at the Vrillan representative, whose form literally sparkled with intrigue. Can't have the whole galaxy catching on to our secret combat training program, can we? Galen's secondary eyes narrowed to dangerous slits. Explain the parameters of this simulation. Fastbreak grinned and slipped into what his staff referred to as his movie trailer voice. 2 teams of 5 warriors, a contested arena, 1 spherical weapon that must be manipulated with precise kinetic control. The goal? Launch the weapon through your opponent's elevated target zone while defending your own. Victory requires mastery of both offense and defense, along with the strategic use of resources and split-second tactical decisions. He could practically hear the military attachés scrambling to take notes. The Vrillan representative had crystallized 3 new facets of understanding, just from the excitement. And the conditions of combat? Galen asked, leaning in. Close quarters combat, constant movement, high-speed projectile tracking, Fastbreak said. And the most devastating weapon in humanity's arsenal, trash talk, a psychological warfare technique so potent its use is strictly regulated in civilian settings. Galen huddled with his advisors, their bone ridges clicking as they conferred rapidly. Fastbreak seized the opportunity to send a quick message to his own team. They're buying it. Prepare yourselves. Finally, Galen stood to his full height, bone ridges flaring. The Xanathar Empire accepts your challenge. We will assemble our finest warriors to master your basketball combat simulation. Name your champions. Fastbreak couldn't suppress his grin. I've got just the team in mind, Fastbreak said, a mischievous grin spreading across his face. Let's start with our Supreme Commander of Basketball Operations, Coach Carmen the Titan Thompson. At that moment, the chamber doors opened dramatically, and Olivia strode in, her former WNBA championship rings catching the light, glinting with each step. She was dressed in what the aliens must have thought was ceremonial combat attire, an immaculate tracksuit with Coach boldly emblazoned across the back. "Who's ready for some drills?" she called out, bouncing a basketball with effortless precision. The sound of the ball hitting the floor echoed through the chamber, sharp and commanding like a warning shot. The Vrillan representative actually cracked a smile, while Galen's bone ridges flattened, a sure sign that confusion was taking over. "What manner of projectile weapon is that?" Galen asked, his voice full of disbelief. Olivia spun the ball on her finger with a flourish, a move that triggered several emergency alerts from the Council's weapons detection systems. "This is just the practice model," she said with a wink. "Wait until you see what we use in real competition." Fastbreak could see Galen's tertiary eye twitch. The Xanathar was in too deep to back out now. His species' pride would never allow it, but the seed of doubt had been planted. It was clear Galen was starting to realize that maybe, just maybe, humanity's creativity and problem-solving was far beyond what he'd anticipated. And they hadn't even gotten to the part about dribbling yet. The following 2 weeks became a whirlwind of the most bizarre training regimens ever seen in galactic history. In the Xanathar preparation chamber, a vast, sterile facility filled with holographic combat simulators, Galen's elite warriors attacked basketball with the same precision and strategy they would use to plan a planetary invasion. "Report," Galen demanded, his gaze focused on a wall of screens displaying archived basketball footage. Tazik, a younger Xanathar with bone ridges still soft and not yet fully formed, clicked nervously at his data console. "We've identified several critical combat patterns, sir. The humans appear to favor something called a fast break, which seems to be a blitzkrieg tactic, and their full-court press bears remarkable similarities to our orbital blockade formations." "What about this charging violation?" Galen asked. "Is that some kind of banned weapons protocol?" "Unclear, sir," Tazik replied. but we've noticed that shouting in one seems to be a ritual combat cry. Meanwhile, in what used to be the station's cargo bay, now commandeered by Coach Carmen, the human team was undergoing a very different kind of training. "Your footwork is sloppy, Rex," Carmen barked at the former NBA center, now officially listed in diplomatic records as special attaché for vertical warfare. "My grandmother could post up better than that, and she's been dead for 30 years. Rex, the Rim Reaper, Williams, all 6'1" of him, grinned back while practicing his skyhook. "You think the Xanathar have figured out they can't actually eat the ball yet? 5 credit tokens says they'll try it at least once. Did you see their analysis report?" Fastbreak called from the free throw line. "They think the 3-point line is some kind of demilitarized zone." Olivia blew her whistle, gathering the team. "All right, listen up. Our scouts report the Xanathar are taking this like it's real military training. They've got strategy rooms, combat analysts, and 3 different committees just to study proper jumping protocol. Please tell me someone's recording this." One of the players asked, "The Vrillan representative has been live streaming it to half the galaxy." Fastbreak nodded. "Apparently we're the highest-rated entertainment channel in 3 sectors." Back in the Xanathar chamber, Tazik was having a meltdown over the footage. "Sir, I've watched this Space Jam documentary 17 times. I'm deeply concerned about the implications of their bio-enhanced super soldier program." Galen's bone ridges clattered in frustration. "Focus on actionable intelligence, Tazik. What about this slam dunk maneuver? It looks like some kind of finishing move." "Our physics division is still debating how it doesn't violate several fundamental laws of combat," Tazik said, adjusting his displays nervously. "Also, sir, there's something else. The humans seem to be laughing during their training sessions." "Laughing?" Galen's secondary eyes narrowed, horrified. "Laughing? And what is this trash-talking I've been hearing about?" "We've recorded Commander Sullivan telling Coach Thompson that her mother was a hamster," Tazik said, wide-eyed with disbelief. Galen's eyes grew even wider. "These humans are more psychologically advanced than we thought. Weaponized familial insults as part of their combat training?" The Xanathar training regimen grew more intense as the days wore on. They developed complex mathematical models to calculate optimal shot trajectories and analyzed human muscle movements as though studying enemy weapon systems. One analyst even spent 3 days mapping the psychological impact of victory dances. Meanwhile, the human team was mostly focused on their 3-pointers and trying not to laugh during briefings. "They've classified the pick and roll as a military formation," Olivia reported during a practice session, wiping tears of laughter from her eyes. "And they've officially inquired about the strategic importance of squeak marks on the court." Fastbreak watched a Xanathar practice session where they tried to dribble with all 4 hands at once, almost feeling bad. Almost. "Should we tell them?" Rex asked, watching a Xanathar warrior attempt a free throw in full battle armor. "Absolutely not," Carmen declared, bouncing a ball off Galen's bone ridges as he passed by, loaded down with analysis reports. "This is the most fun I've had since we convinced the Vrillan that humans photosynthesize through our hair." To his credit, Galen caught the ball with minimal screaming about unprovoked projectiles. Progress. Finally, the day of the great combat simulation arrived, and it came with the subtlety of a supernova. The station's largest hangar bay had been transformed into a basketball court, with representatives from 27 species crammed into hastily constructed stands. The Vrillan delegation had gotten so into the spirit of things, they formed themselves into a crystalline jumbotron. The Xanathar team entered first, marching in perfect military formation, their streamlined battle armor glinting with the sharp precision of their traditional colors. Crimson markings, and to the endless amusement of the humans, jersey numbers etched in perfect regulation font. "They look like they're preparing to invade Planet Fitness," Rex whispered as they waited in the human locker room. Olivia paced in front of her team, her game face firmly in place through sheer force of will. "Listen up, people. They've studied every move we make, but they still don't have a clue. Use that to your advantage. And for the love of all that's holy, someone please capture their faces when we nail our first alley-oop." The human team emerged from the locker room to a chorus of confused murmurs from the alien spectators. Their basketball uniforms looked hilariously casual compared to the imposing Xanathar battle gear. Galen's bone ridges practically tied themselves in knots as he scanned the humans. "Where is your combat armor?" he demanded, his tone laced with suspicion. "Oh, this is our traditional battle attire," Fastbreak responded, his face the picture of seriousness. "The shorts maximize mobility during high-stakes tactical maneuvers." The head referee, a six-armed procedural from the Galactic Sports Federation, floated to the center of the court. The referee had spent the last week studying basketball rules with the same meticulous dedication typically reserved for unraveling quantum mysteries. "This competition will adhere to all traditional Earth protocols," the referee announced, their translation device struggling to maintain a neutral tone. "This includes the ceremonial practice known as the jumping ball." Galen stepped forward, his bone ridges bristling with pride. "We have thoroughly studied this opening ritual. Our warriors are ready for anything." Before Galen could finish, the referee tossed the ball into the air. Rex, effortlessly leaping higher than the Xanathar center, who had clearly expected some kind of formal combat initiation, tapped it to Fastbreak. What followed, according to one Vreelan observer, was the most elegant chaos ever documented. The Xanathar had memorized every basketball play in existence. They could recite the rules verbatim. They had calculated the optimal shooting trajectories for every position on the court. But what they hadn't accounted for was that knowing the theory of basketball was a whole different beast from actually playing it. Their first offensive possession resulted in 3 traveling violations, 2 double dribbles, and what looked like an attempt to negotiate with the ball. "You must submit to proper kinetic manipulation," the Xanathar point guard shouted, trying in vain to control the bouncing sphere. Tazik, observing from the analyst section, was frantically typing updates into his combat logs. "Sir, the humans appear to be employing a form of gravitational manipulation. The spherical weapon responds to them naturally." "It's called dribbling, my dude," Rex shouted as he casually snatched the ball and scored on a breakaway dunk. The Xanathar defensive formation, which was based on a perfect zone coverage theory, crumbled the moment the humans executed a basic pick and roll. Their meticulously crafted offensive strategies evaporated under the force of what Carmen would later refer to as basic man-to-man. "Good heavens," Olivia muttered, clearly taken aback by the chaos. By the end of the first quarter, the score was Humans 32, Xanathar technical fouls. "Request tactical pause," Galen demanded, his bone ridges completely rattled. The referee granted the timeout, and the Xanathar team huddled around their commander. "Our combat simulations did not prepare us for this level of informal warfare," one of the warriors admitted, all 4 hands clutching a water bottle, unsure of what to do next. "They appear to be employing some form of psychological warfare," another reported. "The one called Rim Reaper said my bone ridges were, how did he put it, looking kind of rough today." Galen's secondary eyes narrowed in disbelief as he watched Carmen sketching plays on a whiteboard. "They're adapting faster than we anticipated. Deploy Protocol Omega." The Xanathar returned to the court with grim resolve, but their movements now resembled a military parade, complete with synchronized movements and only occasional attempts at ball handling. "They're running full battle formations," Fastbreak observed, astounded by the geometric patterns they had devised. "This is something straight out of a tactical manual." Olivia, unable to contain her laughter, called a timeout just to let her team stop chuckling. "Focus, people," she said, though her own shoulders were shaking with suppressed laughter. "Yes, they tried to substitute in a tactical support unit. Yes, they're treating the free throw line like a DMZ. And yes, that last shot clearly had low-orbit intentions. But we've still got a game to win." The second quarter proceeded with more cohesion, though it was only because the Xanathar had finally grasped that trying to eat the ball was, in fact, against regulation. They managed to score their first points, but their celebration had to be cut short due to time constraints and several violations of basic physics laws. As halftime neared, Tazik's latest analysis flashed on the Xanathar bench. "Preliminary findings suggest that humans may have evolved specifically for this form of combat," he reported, his voice filled with concern. "Recommend immediate tactical reassessment." The scoreboard, conveniently displayed across the Vreelan collective, told the entire story. Humans 58, Xanathar 4, with 1 point pending review for possible violation of the Geneva Convention. Galen's bone ridges were lower than Fastbreak had ever seen them. Halftime entertainment consisted of Tazik presenting an emergency briefing to the Xanathar High Command, complete with holographic diagrams and what appeared to be a lengthy philosophical treatise on the nature of the pick and roll. Our fundamental misunderstanding, Tazik nervously clicked, was assuming this was primarily a physical contest, but observe the human psychological warfare tactics. He played footage of Rex shouting, "Come at me, bro," before executing a particularly devastating dunk. "The humans are using advanced morale disruption techniques," Tazik continued, his voice quivering. "They call it trash talk, but our linguistic analysis suggests it is actually a sophisticated form of combat hypnosis." Galen's bone ridges rippled with sudden understanding. "Then we must adapt. Deploy the emergency cultural integration protocols." Meanwhile, in the human locker room, Olivia had her own kind of strategic conversation. "Okay, who taught the Xanathar Center to yell Kobe?" she demanded, trying her best to maintain a stern coach face. Every player immediately pointed at Rex, who defensively raised his hands. "Look, if they're going to lose, they might as well lose with style." They submitted a formal request to the referee asking if they could get dunked on, Fastbreak added, wiping tears from his eyes. Apparently they think it's some kind of ritual combat submission. When the third quarter began, the Xanathar unveiled their new strategy, attempting to replicate human trash talk. The results were, well, unique. "Your maternal unit's biological parameters fail to meet optimal standards," one Xanathar warrior shouted at Rex. Did you just your mama joke me?" Rex asked, completely caught off guard, nearly missing a rebound in the process. "Your evolutionary lineage is questionable," another Xanathar yelled during a free throw attempt. "And your bone ridges are—" "Oh, wait!" The Vrillin Jumbotron suddenly displayed a series of laughing emojis between the score updates, causing the crowd to chuckle. But something unexpected happened. As the Xanathar embraced the chaos, they actually started to improve. "Sort of," Olivia muttered, her eyes wide with surprise, watching a Xanathar successfully make a layup followed by an attempted victory dance that nearly started an international incident. Though I'm pretty sure that last move broke several laws of physics. Galen, once a military commander, had shifted into the role of a basketball coach, albeit one who still used military terminology. "Deploy lateral movement protocols," he shouted. "Maintain spherical weapon control and remember your psychological warfare training. Your shooting form lacks geometric precision," a Xanathar guard yelled at Fastbreak, who was so busy laughing that he completely missed a three-pointer. The crowd, now thoroughly invested in the game, started doing the wave. The Vrillin Collective, with their crystalline forms, created a mesmerizing light show that dazzled the audience. Representatives from other species were scribbling notes, clearly planning their own future combat simulations. Tazik, in the analyst section, was now frantically trying to categorize human basketball moves using military lingo. "The maneuver designated breaking ankles appears to involve localized gravitational manipulation," he wrote in his notes. "And the no-look pass likely requires some form of telepathic coordination. Also, why do humans keep calling various moves filthy? Request immediate sanitation protocol review." By the end of the third quarter, the Xanathar had managed to push their score into double digits, mostly by abandoning their pre-planned plays in favor of something they dubbed yeet-based offensive protocols. The scoreboard now read, Humans 87, Xanathar 23 with a footnote, plus style points for effort. Galen's bone ridges had begun twitching nervously every time Rex wound up for another dunk. But there was also something else in Galen's secondary eyes, a gleam that suggested he was beginning to understand the joke. The real question was whether he would find it amusing or terrifying. As the final quarter approached, Tazik shared his analysis, which now appeared on the display screens in the form of basketball memes. "Recommend deployment of secret weapon," he said seriously. Galen, now determined, nodded. "Initiate Operation Chaos. It's time to show these humans what happens when Xanathar get their game on." Operation Chaos, as it turned out, involved the Xanathar throwing out all their military precision and fully embracing the fundamental human concept of YOLO. The fourth quarter began with the Xanathar team emerging from their huddle wearing their battle armor backwards. Tactical unpredictability, Galen announced with pride. Rex grinned, shaking his head. This is pod racing. He stopped, looking around at his teammates. Wait, wrong human cultural reference. My bad. The Xanathar had finally figured out one important truth about basketball. Sometimes you just need to have fun with it. What followed could only be described as either brilliant or horrifying, depending on your perspective of intergalactic diplomacy. The Xanathar began attempting behind-the-back passes with all four of their arms. They attempted an alley-oop that looked more like a synchronized swimming routine than basketball. One particularly enthusiastic warrior even tried to dribble two balls at once, which would have been impressive if either ball had been the actual game ball. Your attempt at defensive positioning is suboptimal, dog, a Xanathar center shouted, clearly pleased with their newly adopted slang. Fastbreak wiped a tear from his eye. I've never been so proud of an opposing team. The Vrillin collective was now displaying a mixture of game highlights and what appeared to be ancient Earth reaction memes. At one point, they started playing Space Jam on repeat, which very nearly resulted in diplomatic disaster. With 2 minutes left on the clock, Galen made a decision that would eventually lead to the game being classified as top secret. He subbed himself in. If our species is to understand this combat form, Galen declared gravely, his bone ridges set in a determined angle, as commander, I must experience it firsthand. What followed would be talked about for years in hushed tones across diplomatic circles. Galen, Supreme Commander of the Xanathar military, Ambassador to the Galactic Council, and noted critic of human combat tactics, attempted a slam dunk. The laws of physics naturally objected. The Vrillan collective briefly suffered a glitch from sensory overload, and Tazik's analysis systems crashed, requiring a reboot. But somehow, against all odds, Galen managed to get the ball through the hoop. His method, however, looked less like a basketball move and more like an interpretive dance routine performed by a drunken giraffe. The human team gave him a standing ovation. The game ended with a final score of humans 106, Xanathar 42, with an honorary point awarded to Galen for his contribution to interstellar entertainment. In the post-game ceremony, Galen approached Fastbreak, his bone ridges still slightly askew from his dunk attempt, looking like a being who had witnessed something both horrifying and magnificent. Commander Sullivan, he said, his voice a mixture of respect and disbelief. I must admit, I have underestimated your species. I am thoroughly entertained. And, I suppose, a little terrified. I think we may have underestimated the complexity of human combat training, Galen admitted, his bone ridges twitching in what could only be described as stunned disbelief. Fastbreak, struggling to keep a straight face, replied, You know, we do have other sports we could show you. Ever heard of rugby? Galen's face went completely white. 2 days later, under Galactic Council Directive 47B, Protection of Diplomatic Sanity, all records of the basketball game were officially sealed. Basketball was now classified as a Class A combat simulation, and future demonstrations would require special clearance from the highest authorities. Tazik's final, redacted report contained only one line. Conclusion: humans don't need advanced technology or overwhelming numbers. They can weaponize literally anything, including fun. May the cosmos have mercy on us all. However, the Vrillan collective kept the footage. It had become something of a tradition at their diplomatic functions, typically shown right after someone asks why humans are still regarded as a developing species. The question was always followed by a carefully timed showing of the game's highlights. And deep within the station's secure archives, there's a recording of Galen, alone in the Xanathar practice facility, tirelessly working on his jump shot. Some claim that if you listen closely, you can still hear him muttering Kobe under his breath, convinced that it holds the key to intergalactic success, the end.